You all remember Blake Masters, who ran and lost a Senate seat during the 2022 midterms. Blake Masters, loser, is apparently planning to run again for the Senate, although this time for the seat currently occupied by Kyrsten Sinema, who's switched her affiliation to independent. But there is a problem for Blake Masters and his plan, because fellow Arizona loser Kari Lake is also looking at running for that same seat. And according to some new reports, they've been feuding behind the scenes. They had an exceptionally contentious phone call this weekend. And let's get into some of the details that were reported by the Daily Beast on that phone call. On Saturday night around 11 p.m., Lake called Masters to have a conversation. Earlier in the day, the New York Times published a report revealing that former President Donald Trump had spoken to Masters about a week ago to discuss his Senate plans. And the Daily Beast had just published a story only a few hours before the call on how Masters may be having second thoughts about running. Sources familiar with the conversation said the call lasted about 10 minutes, describing the discussion as intense, paranoid, and erratic. The call, which Lake initiated after speaking at a fundraiser in Florida, started with Lake pressing Masters on why he's been floating his name as a possible candidate for the Senate seat. Now, I think that these stories are so interesting because people who work for them and had information on this call are the ones who have to leak it, right? So to some extent, you know that one or both of these potential Senate candidates wanted this phone call to be public information, because the people who are going to be close enough to them to have either literally overheard the phone call or to be debriefed on the phone call by these candidates, they're not going to be released to be giving these statements to the Daily Beast unless the candidates themselves, or in this case the potential candidates, want that information out there. So they're fighting and they want this information public. Let's get some more information from this phone call, from that Daily Beast article. Have your intentions changed? Lake asked Masters. Masters said he doesn't intend to run again. Lake if she gets into the race. But he pressed Lake, who unsuccessfully ran for governor in Arizona, on why she hadn't announced her Senate campaign yet. Masters said he thought Lake was wasting time by not announcing, according to one of the sources familiar with the call. You should have been in this race yesterday, Masters said. The phone call wasn't all advice. Among a number of spirited moments, there was plenty of score settling. Lake said she and her campaign did as much as they could to help Masters in the 2022 race. And you ran and hid under the bed as soon as the election was over, Lake allegedly said. Now, the conversation got particularly salty, for lack of a better word, when Masters apparently told Lake that he didn't believe she could win the Senate race and that he would. From Daily Beast, Masters told Lake she needed to move to the center a little bit on tone, not policy. Masters also told Lake she needed to surround herself with people that have a little skepticism and don't just drink the Kool-Aid. The source added he also allegedly told Lake that he didn't think she'd been taking the Senate race seriously, noting that she's pursued other opportunities like potentially being Trump's 2024 vice presidential nominee. Now, Lake isn't the only person who doesn't want Masters to run. Apparently, Trump himself called Masters, saying that he didn't think he could beat Kari Lake in the race. Now, Kari Lake did get significantly more votes for governor than Masters did while he was running for Senate on the same ballot. But Sharon, I think the funniest part of this is the conversation ended with Kari Lake demanding that Masters agree with her that the gubernatorial election was stolen from her, which I feel like is just such strong evidence that Kari Lake has really fallen into this like Trump. She's descended into the Trumpian madness that her election must have also been stolen from her, and everyone needs to agree with that. Otherwise, they are, written out of her book.
Yeah, that's a hell of a book. And when is she going to look forward? Okay, this was an incredible phone call. You're right, with lots of saltiness. I counted, 10 minutes. I think he said the call lasted. That's like an insult every 90 seconds between these two. And the thing about it to me is if Trump is backing Lake, which his phone call a day or so earlier seems to indicate, that's the best thing for Masters. It really is the best thing for him. It does seem like she'll pick anything, okay? It could be leader of a Girl Scouts troop next, whatever seems hot at the time and has one of those glow lights. It's a strange cesspool that this whole thing has devolved into, and who knows where the bottom is. Can someone tell us where the bottom is and give us the recipe to this Kool-Aid that they're drinking? What is in this Kool-Aid that keeps them all so dishonest?
And I think for Kari Lake, it's interesting because I think he makes a good point to some extent, to the idea that he does make a point at all, that she has situated herself to be in a position to be Trump's vice president. And I think that her continued drinking of that Kool-Aid has put her in his good graces continuously, whereas other people, other members of the party who have been insufficiently loyal have maybe lost that. But what is the end goal? I don't think that she'll win the Senate race, and it's shaping up to be interesting because it looks like if Kyrsten Sinema runs as an independent, then she will be siphoning votes away, not from the Democrat candidate Gallegos, but away from Kari Lake or Blake Masters or whoever ends up being the Republican on the ticket. So actually a lot of Democrats are pressuring her to run. So to be a spoiler, I think is really interesting. But it's, for me, it's eventually there's gonna be a Republican Party. There has to be eventually post-Trump, whether it's because he's locked up behind bars or because his unhealthy habits and his age have finally caught up to him and he passes away. Not saying that I want that to happen, but I mean, inevitably death comes for all of us. So eventually there will be a Republican Party post-Trump, and people like Kari Lake, I think, have put themselves in a lane where there's no political future. There's no professional future, right? Because she, was a TV host, a news personality. That's gone unless she wants to work at whatever the next iteration of OAN is at the time. If that's something she, is interested in going back to. I mean, I don't know, Sharon. I feel like I've seen so many of these Republican politicians just bury their head in the sand and put themselves so firmly in the Trump camp, change their personalities to resemble him. And then what is the end goal? Because this will come to an end, in my opinion. I don't know, maybe you see things differently.
Well, I think it's cloudy because it won't end until, as you mentioned, he ends in one way or another, because we've seen people jump off the train just briefly before getting on at the next stop, whether it was after January 6th and Lindsey Graham and Kevin McCarthy, but it has not ended yet. And with no viable prospects, but maybe some speaking fees and fundraising, she has to, in many ways, I think, stay hitched to the MAGA train, because where else, as you mentioned, is she going to go? But I would love to see that three-way race, Sinema, okay, Masters and Lake, and a debate. I would love to just see that debate while the Democrats over there just kind of waiting on whoever's gets the trophy, if you will. That would be rich.
Absolutely, and you know what? I think that at the end of this feud, Masters and Lake will both end up the losers. And you're right, the Democrat who's just been biding his time, winning favor amongst the voters because he announced his candidacy a long time ago, is gonna end up the winner, at least hopefully, electorally, at least politically. But we'll have to keep an eye on that as things develop in Arizona and see where that goes.
Check out the Damage Report podcast each day, wherever you get your podcasts, whether Pocket Casts or Stitcher or iTunes. You can join me as I give you the news and stories you want, with a range of co-hosts and interview guests jumping in on the fun each day. Again, that's the Damage Report, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you get them at iTunes, don't forget to rate and review. Sometimes I'll read them live on the show.